recently got into an argument, and we had made up, and I said I was going to be a good girl. And then she went to sleep. I guess I hurt her feelings or something. And she said, I'm starting to feel more relaxed. Don't hurt me.
We all know the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a woman who allegedly lived under the control of her overbearing mother, Didi. But here's the real question. Was Gypsy merely a victim of her circumstances, or did she have far more agency and control over what happened than she let on? Today we are going to break down the facts to understand if Gypsy's punishment truly fits her actions. We'll be diving into her decisions, her planning, and her intentions to see if she might have deserved more time behind bars. Let's begin with Gypsy's own admission. The idea to kill her mother wasn't something that just came up suddenly. Gypsy had been thinking about killing Didi for an entire year before it happened. Crucial here is that this idea wasn't planted by anyone else. Gypsy said it herself. Whose idea was it to kill your mother? Mine.
And was she aware of any of this?
No, sir.
At some point you decided to kill your mother, is that correct?
Yes.
When was that?
Thoughts of it started a year prior to the murder actually happening.
Whose idea was it to kill your mother?
Mine.
Why did you want to kill your mother?
Because I wanted to be free of her hold on me.
Did you and Nick ever talk about this?
Yes,
Who initially brought up killing your mother?
I did.
This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a premeditated plan that nurtured over time, developed with a specific end in mind. Gypsy was not merely influenced by Nick Godejohn, her boyfriend. She was the one taking the lead. Gypsy convinced Nick, a boyfriend she had never even met in person for the majority of their relationship, that murdering her mother was the only way they could be together. She made him feel like he was her savior, feeding into his fantasies of being a hero. This wasn't someone tagging along for the ride. Gypsy wielded her influence over Nick with intention and purpose.
How did you change your mind and decide not to kill her?
I started having doubts, second thoughts.
Did you ever then change your mind back to the initial decision to kill her?
Yes.
Why did you change your mind back to killing her?
My mother and I got into an argument 2 days prior to the murder occurring. And Nick asked me, are we still doing this? Am I still coming there to do this? Yes or no? And I said yes.
Who talked you into killing your mother?
I did.
Gypsy didn't just have the idea, she acted on it decisively. For example, when she realized Nick was running out of money for the hotel they needed for the plan, Gypsy decided to move up the timeline. It was her call, not Nick's. She pushed forward without hesitation, even when there was an opportunity to delay. This kind of action paints a very different picture. One of a person who wasn't just a follower, but rather someone fully in control, managing the situation to make sure her plan went ahead, no matter the circumstances.
Now, the date that that your mother was murdered, was that the original date, or was it moved up?
It was moved up.
Who moved it up?
I did.
I'm going to object at this point, Your Honor. I believe these questions are outside the scope of the cross.
I'm going to allow it. Why did you move it up?
He told me that the money was running out and he didn't think that he had enough money for another night's stay at the hotel.
Now, you talked a little bit about you had to clean up after your mother's murder. You did that voluntarily, correct?
Yes.
He didn't make you.
No.
What were you doing while your mother was being killed?
I was sitting in the bathroom, on the bathroom floor with my hands covering my ears.
Then there's the weapon itself. Gypsy stole a knife from Walmart. Nick originally wanted a machete, but Gypsy chose something smaller and easier to steal while she was in her wheelchair, ensuring that it wouldn't draw suspicion. This was not a choice she made under pressure from Nick. She actively sought a weapon she could easily obtain. She took charge of logistics to make sure the plan worked. Gypsy wasn't just a bystander in Nick's dark fantasies. She was a key player, making sure everything was set for their ultimate goal.
States Exhibit 145. Did Nick have a knife that was used in the murder?
I supplied the knife.
Where did you get the knife?
I stole it from Walmart
And why did you steal it from Walmart?
because I didn't see a knife that was sufficient enough in our own home.
There was also some gloves that have been introduced into evidence.
Yes,
Where did Nick get the gloves?
I supplied them.
And where did you get the gloves?
They were already in our house.
How did Nick know when to do this crime, the time-wise, that morning?
I told him.
Gypsy made these decisions not out of fear, but with a calculated mindset to ensure success. She lied to Nick about her illnesses and her need for a wheelchair long before the murder, to present herself as someone in need of rescue. This played a big role in convincing Nick to be involved. Gypsy framed their conversations about killing Didi as though it were their only option. She led the discussions and made sure Nick was fully committed, constantly nagging him toward the inevitable conclusion. This was not a situation where Nick planned and Gypsy reluctantly agreed. Gypsy was shaping the narrative, controlling the timeline, and ensuring the plan moved forward. Gypsy had even admitted she had considered other ways out before deciding on murder. She thought about running away or getting pregnant, or ultimately dismissed those options because they weren't permanent solutions. Gypsy wanted something that would end her mother's control over her for good. She weighed her choices and decided on the most extreme path: murder. She didn't shy away from violence. She embraced it as the only way out.
Now, I want to start talking about June of 2015. You mentioned that you had decided to kill your mother at some point.
Yes, sir.
Was that the only plan you ever had in terms of how to get out of your situation?
Besides running away, that is the only thing, yes.
Did you have other alternative plans other than killing your mother?
Yes,
How many plans altogether did you have?
3.
Okay. Did you have names for those plans?
Yes.
What were the names?
Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C.
And could you tell us about the other 2 possibilities other than killing your mother?
Yes. Plan A, we already had tried that, which was to meet up at the movie theater, act like we never met before, and try and start a relationship from there, with my mother's permission.
What was the other alternative plan?
Another one was for me to get pregnant. I believed that since he would be the father, he would have to be in my life.
Her actions after the decision was made also highlight her control over the situation. Gypsy and Nick discussed what they would do if they got caught. Gypsy made sure they had a cover story ready, a story that painted her as the innocent party manipulated by Nick. This wasn't a haphazard plan. It was a well-thought-out strategy to avoid consequences. Gypsy wasn't acting like someone being dragged into something against her will. She was calculating each step, planning for every possible outcome, and making decisions that would ensure her best chance of freedom.
As for the, I'm jumping back just a second, okay? Going back real quick to your plans for afterwards when you were in Wisconsin, you had a pre-planned story that you were going to say in the event that you were ever caught, right?
Yes, sir.
And he came up with that story.
Yes, sir.
And so, considering the possibility of getting caught after the murder, the defendant told you of a story that you guys could come up with.
Yes, sir.
And actually, before the police arrested you in Wisconsin, you were hiding in the closet of Nick's room together, right?
That is correct.
And he confirmed with you to make sure that you have the story down.
That is correct.
Gypsy's role wasn't just that of a helpless daughter escaping abuse. Gypsy was orchestrating everything, making decisions with a clear intent, and assuring that Nick was ready and willing to follow through. When we consider her role in all of this, it becomes clear that Gypsy wasn't just reacting to her circumstances. She was actively planning and executing a path to what she saw as her freedom. Let's talk about another aspect of Gypsy's motivations: financial freedom. For Gypsy, escaping her mother's control wasn't just about gaining independence. It was also about securing a future for herself and Nick. Leading up to the murder, Gypsy stole $800 from her mother to pay for Nick's trip and his hotel stay. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was calculated and planned. She needed Nick by her side to carry out the plan, and she took the necessary steps to make that happen.
Now, you indicated that you paid for this trip to Missouri by Nick in 2015. What all did you pay for?
I paid for the Greyhound bus ticket. I paid for the hotel and for eating money.
And how did you pay for this? How did you get the money to Nick?
I stole the money from my mother and I sent it to him via the mail.
Gypsy, if you wouldn't mind speaking up just a bit.
Yes,
Just a little soft.
Sorry.
I think you said you put it in the mail?
Yes, sir.
In what form was the money?
Cash.
Do you know how much you sent him that time?
I don't know the exact amount. Probably about $800.
And how would you get the money how would you steal the money from your mother?
She kept it in a money pouch.
After the murder, Gypsy stole over 4,000 US dollars from Didi. This wasn't about survival. It was about comfort. She wanted enough money to be set for a while.
Now, when you and Nick left her house, did you take any money with you?
Yes.
How much?
A little over $4,000.
And where did you get that money?
I stole it from my mother's safe.
While you were gone, how much of that money did you spend?
A couple of $100.
Just one moment, Judge.
Yes, sir.
Gypsy even said, with the 5,000 US dollars I have, we will be set. She and Nick discussed how they would use the money to start a life together, living comfortably for as long as they could. This was not an act driven by desperation or immediate need. It was intentional, with Gypsy ensuring they had what they needed for their future.
So if you see there, you're on both. See it where it's pink and it says Gypsy?
Yeah.
Looks like you kind of had an idea of wanting to go to Milwaukee. You thought sort of that bigger city might be appealing, correct?
I guess that is correct.
And it was the defendant that actually told you, no, I'd rather that we live here in Waukesha. As you can see on the left, see on his text how it's blue and it says defendant over it.
Yes, sir.
Then after he shoots down Milwaukee, you basically say, okay, we can start looking for apartments in Waukesha. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then when it came to the money, you can see here in this conversation on May 30th that you text him that with the $5,000 I have, we will be set. And he says, good idea, correct?
Yes, sir.
And at that time, you thought $5,000 would last you guys a long time, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you say that it's $5,000 you have, and he actually responds there on the left, dear, I know, but you mean our $5,000. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
He wanted to make sure that you knew that wasn't your money, that was going to be your money together, correct?
Yes, sir.
The aftermath of the murder provides even more insight into Gypsy's mindset. Gypsy didn't show hesitation or panic when it came to time to cover their tracks. She demonstrated clear-headed thinking, knowing exactly what needed to be done to avoid getting caught. Consider the knife. Mailing it wasn't Nick's idea, nor was it something she did impulsively. Gypsy knew that carrying the knife could be risky if they were stopped or searched. Instead, she decided to mail it, something rationalized as a normal action, saying people mail knives all the time. This wasn't an emotionally driven decision. It was a calculated choice to distance herself from the murder weapon, minimizing the chance of being linked back to her.
Who decided to mail the knife through the mail?
I did.
Why did you decide to mail it through the mail?
Because he wanted me to take it in my backpack, and I never had ridden on a bus before, and I didn't think that there were any way that I can get it through without being undetected. So I figured mail it. People mail knives all the time. They buy knives offline. Nobody will know the difference.
The return address on the package, what return address was it?
Mine.
And then it was mailed to his house in Wisconsin?
Yes, sir.
And then there is the infamous Facebook post. After Didi was dead, Gypsy logged into her mother's account and posted, "That bitch is dead." This wasn't a cry for help. It was a calculated attempt to mislead anyone who might investigate the crime. Gypsy wanted to make it look like a violent stranger had broken in and committed the murder. She carefully crafted the post and directed attention away from herself and Nick, portraying the crime as something random and brutal.
Now, there was a Facebook post made about this case. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Do you know where that Facebook post was made, on whose account?
Yes, sir.
Whose account?
My mother's.
What did the Facebook post say? If you can recall exactly, or close to it.
That bitch is dead.
Was there a comment in the post as well about the daughter?
Yes, sir.
What was that comment?
I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but something to the fact of, I raped her sweet, innocent daughter. Her laugh was so fucking loud.
Who made that post?
I did.
Gypsy went even so far as to pretend to be Nick in the post, framing him as the lone instigator of the crime while making herself appear like a helpless bystander. This wasn't the behavior of someone overwhelmed by trauma. It was a deliberate attempt to create confusion and shift the blame. She wanted authorities to see her as the innocent party, someone caught up in something beyond her control. But her actions show otherwise.
Who made that post?
I did.
Did you make that post pretending to be somebody else?
Yes.
And who were you pretending to be?
Nick.
And why would you make that post claiming to be Nick?
I wanted her to be found. I wanted the cops to find her body.
Another calculated move, Gypsy's decision to stay out of sight when Nick checked into the Days Inn motel after the murder. She waited outside with the luggage, not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want to be seen. Gypsy knew the importance of minimizing her visibility to avoid being recognized and connected to the crime. She was thinking ahead, focused on reducing her risk of being caught. Gypsy's behavior after the murder speaks volumes. Shortly after killing Didi, she and Nick went to eat at the Waffle House. This isn't the action of someone in shock or overwhelmed by what had just happened. Instead, it shows a sense of emotional detachment. The murder was just something to be done. And once it was over, Gypsy moved on to normal activities without hesitation. There was no panic, no sense of urgency, just a calm breakfast.
And where did you go that extra day?
We went back to the motel.
What motel?
Days Inn.
Why did you go to that motel?
That was the motel that he was staying at.
Who paid for that motel room?
I did.
Who went in to reserve the room?
Nick did.
Why did Nick go in and make the reservation if you were paying for it?
I didn't want to be seen.
Why did you not want to be seen?
I didn't want to be recognized.
Did you go anyplace else other than Days Inn while you remained in Springfield after your mother's death?
Yes.
Where?
The Waffle House, right across the street. The post office. Walmart. And of course the Greyhound bus station.
Okay, let's take them one at a time. Why did you go into the Waffle House? That may seem like a silly question. Why did you go to the Waffle House?
Because we were hungry.
Okay, when did you go to the Waffle House?
I think it was the morning of the 12th.
The mailing of the knife also speaks to Gypsy's determination to cover her tracks effectively. She included her return address on the package, which suggests that she didn't expect anyone to trace it back to her or consider her suspect. It points to the confidence in the story they had crafted and her belief that she had covered her tracks well enough to avoid suspicion. Gypsy and Nick also had a planned alibi in case they were caught. They had discussed it in advance, agreeing that they would say Didi had kicked Gypsy out, and she had called Nick for help. This story painted Gypsy as the innocent party, manipulated and desperate, trying to evoke sympathy if they were caught. Again, this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment story. It was something Gypsy planned to make herself appear blameless.
Going back real quick to your plans for afterwards when you were in Wisconsin, you had a pre-planned story that you were going to say in the event that you were ever caught, right?
Yes, sir.
And he came up with that story.
Yes, sir.
Even after they arrived in Wisconsin, Gypsy continued to manage the situation. She and Nick hid in Nick's room, and they went over the story again to make sure they were on the same page. This wasn't Nick taking control. It was Gypsy making sure everything was in place, that they both knew what to say if the police came. There was no visible panic, no sense of being overwhelmed, just a strategic focus on sticking to the story. When the police eventually came to arrest them, Gypsy let Nick take the lead. She hid, then emerged in a way that she hoped would make her appear cooperative and innocent. She played the part of the victim, caught up in something she didn't fully understand. This wasn't the behavior of someone overwhelmed by what they had done. It was a calculated effort to appear innocent and mitigate the consequences of her action.
Actually, before the police arrested you in Wisconsin, you were hiding in the closet of Nick's room together, right?
That is correct.
And he confirmed with you to make sure that you have the story down.
That is correct.
Gypsy's cover-up wasn't just about escaping her mother's control. It was about ensuring she could do so without facing repercussions. She showed no hesitation in taking the steps necessary to protect herself from being caught. And she didn't seem to feel the weight of what she had done. Not in her actions, not in her planning, and not in the way she moved forward afterward. Nick Godejohn was far from a conventional partner. He had his own struggles, mental health issues, a fascination with dark fantasies, and a desire to play the role of a hero. But even with all his flaws, it was Gypsy who took control of their relationship and led it down the specific path. She exploited Nick's vulnerabilities, manipulating him with full-scale emotional and psychological control. One key tactic in her manipulation was the creation of the alter egos. Nick had his own alter egos, like Victor and 500-year-old vampire. Instead of distancing herself from his fantasy world, Gypsy leaned in. She created her own characters, such as Ruby and Dimona, that aligned with Nick's alter egos. These personas were specifically designed to make Nick feel like Gypsy was the perfect match for him, someone who understood and embraced his darkest desire.
During the time you and Nick were together, did you ever engage in fantasies or role-playing or anything like that?
Yes.
Did you have names?
Yes.
Tell us about the names you utilized.
Ruby, Candy, Kitty, Bella, Demona.
She played the part of the victim, caught up in something she didn't fully understand. This wasn't the behavior of someone overwhelmed by what they had done. It was a calculated effort to appear innocent and mitigate the consequences of her actions. Gypsy's cover-up wasn't just about escaping her mother's control. It was about ensuring she could do so without facing repercussions. She showed no hesitation in taking the steps necessary to protect herself from being caught. And she didn't seem to feel the weight of what she had done. Not in her actions, not in her planning, and not in the way she moved forward afterward. Nick Godejohn was far from a conventional partner. He had his own struggles, mental health issues, a fascination with dark fantasies, and a desire to play the role of a hero. But even with all his flaws, it was Gypsy who took control of their relationship and led it down the specific path. She exploited Nick's vulnerabilities, manipulating him with full-scale emotional and psychological control.
You decided to come up with your alter egos just to kind of please him.
Yes, sir.
And also, as part of this fantasy, you also started to kind of consider yourselves as master and slave, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the defendant was the master,
Yes, sir.
and you were the slave.
Yes, sir.
And at one point, he had sent you basically like a bill of sale, kind of ownership papers. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And those papers would basically mean that the defendant owned you.
Yes, sir.
She followed his scripts and fulfilled his desires not because she enjoyed it, but because she knew it would keep Nick loyal and willing to do anything for her. Gypsy used Nick's fantasies of violence as a way to draw him into her plan. She framed the murder of Didi as an opportunity for Nick to be the hero she needed, painting her mother as the villain who needed to be eliminated. Gypsy set herself up as the damsel in distress, appealing to Nick's desire to protect her. She convinced him that killing Didi was the only way they could be together, making him believe by doing so, he was fulfilling his role as her savior. When Nick wavered or had doubts, Gypsy was there to push him forward. She used her supposed helplessness, her mother's control, and their shared fantasies to keep Nick on track. When Nick asked if they were still going through with the plan, Gypsy could have backed out, but instead she chose to reaffirm it. She made the choice to move forward without hesitation, knowing what it meant. Gypsy also promised Nick intimacy in return for his help. She knew how much Nick wanted a life with her, both emotionally and physically, and she used this as leverage. After the murder, Gypsy kept her promise, having sex with Nick just hours after the crime. Initially, it was consensual, but she later told him to stop, and he didn't. Nonetheless, the fact that she agreed to it right after her mother's death shows how far she was willing to go, maintain her control over Nick.
He asked you about raping your mother. You actually talked him out of it, right?
Yes.
And you did so by offering the alternative that he would be able to rape you after the murder, correct?
That's correct.
Gypsy's manipulation was multifaceted. She used Nick's need for connection, his insecurities, and his fantasies to mold him into someone who would do whatever she asked. She wasn't simply along for the ride. She was actively steering the ship, ensuring that Nick remained committed to their shared goal. What are we left with? Gypsy Rose Blanchard was undoubtedly living under horrific circumstances controlled by a mother who manipulated her for years. But when it came time to act, Gypsy wasn't just reacting. She was taking control. She planned, she manipulated, she chose to go through with it. Gypsy wasn't merely a victim. She was a participant, a planner, and a manipulator. Did her punishment fit the crime? Given everything we've discussed today, it is hard to wonder if Gypsy's sentence was too lenient. She had other options. She chose murder. She had opportunities to back out, and she chose to move forward. So what do you think? Did she get what she deserved, or did she escape with too little accountability? It's easy to get swept up in the tree. After all, her mother's abuse was real, and it's heartbreaking. But we have to look at the whole picture. Gypsy had agency. She made choices, and those choices had devastating consequences. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Did Gypsy deserve more time behind bars, or was her sentence fair considering her past? This is a story that challenges our understanding of victimhood and responsibility, and we would love to hear your thoughts.